In the early 1970s, there was a real shift in electronic music making, coming out of the really simple music of the 60s, where the kind of discovering of how to make music with synthesizers. Some of the composers started to do more complicated patches that had the ability to express more different musicality. One of those composers was a guy named Barry Schrader, and he was teaching at CalArts under Morton Spotnik, and they had some of the big Buchla 200 systems, which in a way CalArts was like the Buchla testing ground at that time. He developed a patch that he used on the albums Lost Atlantis and Trinity, and obviously building two entire albums around one patch means it was a pretty flexible patch. I'm not sure, I guess in around 2005 I read a blog post that he made about this patch, and the patch involved 5 oscillators, Buchla 258 oscillators that could go from sine wave to saw wave, and the patch allowed those 5 oscillators to track in pitch and to have control of their wave shape from sine to saw, and then also how much they would spread apart. And just with those 3 parameters, there's an enormous amount of variation how he could make textural changes and different kinds of variations in notes, which I think is a big step in electronic music, getting away from really simplistic tones from the first generation of synthesizers into more complex, still nowhere near the complexity of acoustic sounds, but getting more and more expressive. So after reading about this patch in the blog, I've always been really interested in it, but I imagined it being very complicated to set up. So it seemed to me that this was the kind of thing that there's no way that a musician could ever use in the context of a live performance or of an improvisation. So for years, I thought about ways that could be built upon, or that it could be developed to someday be more usable in that context. I had the opportunity to talk to Barry Schrader about this patch, and he was able to explain to me about how I set it up and what some of the intentions were. I learned, I think, initially from an entry on your blog ages ago about this patch that you'd created while you were working on some of your pieces during that time in the 70s at CalArts. And that patch was based on 5 Buca 258 saw wave oscillators tuned together in concert in order to have the flexibility to manipulate that stack in different ways. And ultimately that became the inspiration for a module of ours, the Sawtooth Stack. But I wanted to talk to you about what the idea was, how you arrived at this idea and what you wanted to do with it, what you did with it, which I think anybody can check out the music, and I think it's interesting, and also how hard that was to set up. I know that at the time you had some of the students who were there, and famously the ones that I know are Gary Chang and Peter Grenader, and maybe they were helping you set the machine up because the tuning must have been a nightmare. So can you tell me a little bit about that patch?
Okay, well, first of all, everybody calls it the Lost Atlantis patch, but and I never gave it any name. I really developed it first for a work called Trinity, which I composed in 1976. And Trinity's on the same CD with Lost Atlantis that was released by Innova. If you listen to the very beginning of Trinity, what you hear is the 5 oscillators at a unison. The frequency is 313 hertz, and then you hear the process of them spreading out and then jumping back to 313 hertz. So that's where I developed the patch. Tuning wasn't a problem because I used a meter to be sure I was getting the frequencies that I wanted. In terms of getting the oscillators in tune with each other, there's no phase lock on the 200 oscillators, unfortunately. And so I would tune them until there wasn't any phasing going on. And they would stay in tune for a few hours that way. But then, yes, I did have to retune them. But I never had any help from students or anybody else in terms of tuning or dealing with putting that patch together. And so there've been a lot of people. There's a lot of confusion about and interest in this patch. The diagram that Peter Grenader made for the CD is really very correct and very clear in terms of what is happening simultaneously with contrary and parallel motion. But what it doesn't talk about is the processing of control voltage before it maybe gets into the oscillators or what it's being mixed with. I know what I'm saying sounds confusing. Again, if you listen to the beginning of Trinity, you'll hear what's happening in its most purest form. But I had these modules made by Fukushi Kawakami. They're called the Fortune modules.
There was a technician at CalArts in the early 70s, I think he came in 1972, who ultimately went on to work for Yamaha, but was there effectively interning. And he'd asked Mr. Schrader if there was anything that the Buchla system couldn't do that that he wanted. And so this gentleman was known around to his friends as Fortune. So these 4 custom modules that he made for the Buchla system there are referred to generally as the Fortune modules. And that was part of what was used in this patch in order to route signals and also some slewing.
One of these was a control voltage processor, which allowed me to simultaneously and in real time mix and alter by intentional control voltages in a fairly complicated way. I mean, even I couldn't use that module today. I would have to learn how to use it again. It is quite complicated. That allowed me, if you think of, I have 5 oscillators. They can go from sine to sawtooth. They can go simultaneously in parallel and or contrary motion. And then I can also do whatever, would have come to mind in terms of complicating the control voltage that's going into those oscillators as a group or individually, if I want to, using other devices like the control voltage matrix gate. So at that point, it starts to get very complicated. This is another reason I eventually went to digital, because the control voltage matrix gate allows you to step back from what's available already on the 200, even though you had positive and negative processing of control voltages at multiple points on the oscillators themselves and also in the control voltage processors, the Model 257s. That's the story behind that patch.
Yeah, I guess the idea is to have the ability to change the pitch of the whole group in unison, and then separately spread the pitch of the 5 apart, and separately or in unison also change the wave shape from sine to saw.
And there are other things you have to add into it, like AM and FM, and if you were to ask me, exactly how did you make this particular event 50 years ago, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
In my design philosophy is the concept of micro modules versus macro modules. Micro modules meaning very simple single function type modules, which you would have to patch a lot together in order to create interesting musical patches, versus macro modules meaning that there's in effect an entire patch behind the scenes in order to create something that you can approach from a musician's perspective and get to something potentially more complicated, but in a simple way. And that's conceptually more where I align. Sometimes there's an idea for something really interesting that could happen, but that patch would require 11 modules and 40 patch chords, which you could do, but you would never do it when you're collaborating together with someone else on music. You would never do it when you're improvising in front of people. You would never do it in any circumstance where you don't have the space and time to experiment to get where you're going. So with the concept of the macro module, the balancing and the fine tuning and the tweaking is happening sort of automatically, where when you grab the control, you have, from a musician's perspective, you have a range that goes from the most useful in this way to the most useful in that way, and not a control that only has 10% of its range is actually usable to you. So in the context of this patch and the Sawtooth Stack, the idea is to curate the balancing of trying to get all the oscillators in tune, getting all the oscillators to track together, getting them to have the same range so that the wave shape changes on all of them together, mixing their outputs together in a rational way. All of that is done behind the scenes so that you can get to what you would want to do with it just by plugging in the control and the output. And there you go. Ultimately, the Sawtooth Stack from Verbos Electronics is my attempt to move the idea down the road further. One of the important points was that the five oscillators, which are analog oscillators that naturally drift around, can be auto-tuned. So this doesn't tune to a certain pitch. It just makes the cores of all the oscillators back to unison in terms of volt per octave. So if you set some interval up, some magic patch, and then an hour later it has gotten warmer and drifted off, you can always go back to the beginning. And instead of simply having the oscillators go from sine wave to saw wave and then controlling their pitches, built this on the core of the foundation oscillator module that we make, that has a novel wave shaping section that doesn't only have the sine wave to saw wave blending, but also has richness, which is a bit like the sound of two oscillators in hard sync, which means that the saw wave resets within the cycle multiple times. As you bring it up, you get more small cycles of the wave inside of that master cycle. So 5 oscillators with this wave shaper creates an intense cluster of noise, or a swarm of bees. But it's a mistake. Perhaps it was a mistake in naming, because it's a mistake to think of the module as a super saw Hoover lead machine. Of course it can do that, but it also can do so many other things, from subtle detuned sine waves creepy drones, atmospherics, detuned percussion sounds, like bells or metallic, like a cymbal type sounds that are based on inharmonic relationships between notes. And once we were to a point where we were already putting a microprocessor and already putting mixing in at the end, it was really a small jump to make a stereo VCA at the output and a couple of simple envelope generators and have a complete voice that at 42 HP can be in the black box and stand alone. And it also has MIDI, since there's already a microprocessor there, easy enough. And all of the individual parameters from the panel can be controlled by MIDI continuous controllers.